and I'll try to keep the chat window open. We have, so basically those that haven't joined a code talk before, every Monday we host between Meg and myself, and we're looking for more volunteers. And we generally do pair programming and code wars challenges, and then we try to fill in and alternate with hosting actual real-world developers. And today we're hosting Dr. Miriam Friedel, from the head of data science, and Luke Macfarlan, head of product at Metis Machine here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I'm not going to talk too much about what they're doing because I think they'll go over it. But basically, they have a great machine learning product, and we hope students will try it out, even those that aren't iOS developers. And if you have the time, please do just enter data in the chat responding to Lisa's questions, and I'll send out a link as well on the Slack Code Talk channel, and then compile that just to get an idea of how many folks have taken mobile development classes, how many want to be mobile developers, and I know quite a few of you might not know quite yet, depending on what options you have when you finish the program. And that's about it. So if you have any questions, just send it in the chat, and we'll have a Q&A at the end for our speakers today. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Sherry, for the introduction. Again, my name is Miriam Friedel, and I'm here with Luke Macfarlan. I'm the Director of Data Science. He's the Director of Product here at Metis Machine. And we're going to talk about our product, Skafos, and particularly talk about machine learning on edge devices. So hopefully this will be accessible to all of you. That was one of the reasons we wanted to take the survey, so look forward to your responses on that. So for today's study group, just a brief overview is we're going to give an intro to ML deployment. One of the things I've found working in this space of data science is that terms are not always well defined. So we like to start these things off just by setting the table and defining what is ML deployment, talking about some special considerations for doing machine learning on mobile devices. We're going to walk you through an example use case, building an image classification on an iOS app using our product Skafos, and then we're going to leave time for Q&A since we want to answer any questions that you all might have. So again, just to review the questions, how many of you have taken data science classes, mobile development classes, and then what you're thinking about doing after you've completed this program? And we'll look forward to seeing those compiled responses at the end. But I think there's probably a mix of you, some of you familiar with data science, some of you familiar with software engineering. So we'll try to make this accessible to all of you. Okay, so intro to ML deployment. What are we talking about here? So I think that many of you are familiar with different applications that leverage machine learning. So I'm going to talk through a few examples here. So about a year ago, you guys might be familiar with the Google Art app where it said, give us a selfie and we will show you a piece of art that you look like. And it's actually quite fun. I did it with my daughter last week. That's an example of machine learning. Animoji advanced filters. You might think about Snapchat where you can put, some bunny ears or a nose on your face. That's another example of machine learning in an app. It needs to detect where your face is in order to do the appropriate filters. Recommendation engines, we are all very familiar with those from Amazon. They recommend things we might want to buy based on our purchasing history. And then finally, AR apps like the one that Wayfair is currently offering, where you can envision what a piece of furniture might look like in your home. So all of these applications are an example of ML delivered. It's machine learning in a product. We use it. None of these products would be possible without machine learning. Another thing that we have spent a lot of time thinking about, and probably you guys have noticed as well, is these are all large, multi-million-dollar companies that have spent a huge amount of time and resources in order to build these ML apps. And one of the things that we're trying to do with Skafos is make this type of thing accessible to all of you. We really believe there's going to be a renaissance in mobile development, which Luke's going to talk about a little bit. And so this should not just be the provenance of these big corporations. So one thing I also want to talk about briefly is the machine learning pipeline. Some of you in the audience might be data scientists and familiar with this. For those of you that aren't, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about this. So traditionally, when people think about machine learning and building these types of models, the focus has been on the left-hand side of this diagram. You need to collect the data that's required to build a machine learning model. You need to clean it because it's probably not in the right format. And then you want to train your model. This is where you actually build the recommendation engine, or you build the image classifier, and then you test it. And finally, when you're at the point where the model is doing what you think it should, you either hand it off to someone in DevOps, or you hand it to a software engineer and you kind of walk away. And from a data science perspective, and in many organizations, this has been the focus. But what we're going to talk about today is that the magic really happens when you get to deployment and you take this machine learning and you put it in a product, right? Machine learning is not an end unto itself, right? Machine learning deployed is machine learning plus the product. And so we're going to talk about why we need to get to that delivery. And one of the reasons, which we think about a lot here at Metis Machine, is the importance of a walking skeleton. So I'm a data scientist, I'm a science nerd at heart, and I am very prone to just wanting to dig in and tweak my model and make it perfect. But that's actually less important than just getting your model into a product, getting a walking skeleton in place, getting it out there and having people use it. My recommender system might work absolutely perfectly on example data, but when I actually put it out in the world for someone to use, are they actually buying the things I recommend? One of the big challenges with getting models into production and delivered into a product is infrastructure. And so if you don't think about this from the get-go and put together this walking skeleton, that can really prohibit you from getting your model in front of people. And then finally, getting end-to-end quickly is going to facilitate better product understanding. So you can see if you have the right product market fit, and you can iterate and go from there. So it doesn't mean there's not time to iterate and improve your models. There certainly is, but we would argue that getting to a walking skeleton first is really critical. So now I'm going to turn things over to Luke, who's going to talk about some of the specific challenges for machine learning on mobile devices and give us a product demo.
All right, thanks, Miriam. Just a second here while I've plugged in my device in there. All right, so ML on the edge. Why now? We have this little joke that it's time to party like it's 2008. If anyone remembers, and they probably, I don't know what the demographics of the Flatiron School is, but in 2008, Apple released the App Store. And for people familiar with that period of time, there were some, really junky Nokia mobile user experiences. There was BlackBerry that was leading the market on the mobile UI. And then Steve Jobs announced an iteration of what was available on the iOS platform with the App Store. This was about a year after the iPhone came out. And it blew open a market of ML power, of mobile applications that became what we know of today as, essentially a multi-billion-dollar market, right? We see that happening again. ML-powered applications are now creating a mobile renaissance because machine learning allows people to do things both at the edge and in the cloud that weren't really possible previously. So we joke that we can party like it's 2008 today because this is a whole new generation of capabilities that we can put on our edge devices. So why Skafos? Why are we talking to you about this platform within the context of deploying ML to the edge? It's because it helps you actually build ML-powered products. Apple has an ecosystem for this. They have Core ML, which is what runs on the device. They have Create ML, which is within Xcode allows you to do some very basic model building. But what you find out very quickly is that when building when building models from large chunks of data, or even small chunks of data, and it's a complex model, you really want a lot more horsepower. And so we talk about moving that into the cloud, where we can, create basically a pipeline of work from data to app, where you're actually building something that's ML powered and pushing it into a product very quickly, and you have that walking skeleton that Miriam was talking about before. So what I'm going to show you here in just a minute is moving very quickly from the idea of I have an idea to actually having a quick prototype of that idea set up within Skafos and on a mobile phone. And the idea is it poison ivy? I want an app that is going to classify some leaves and let me know whether or not it thinks that those leaves are poison ivy with some probability. So what are we going to see? We're going to see a Skafos Quick Start project. We'll use one of 7 different types of projects out there. It's called an image classification model. We'll collect some new data and retrain the model. Then we'll push the updated model to my phone. And then the idea is that in the future, we would rinse and repeat this, right? We'd collect more data to make the model better. We might tweak the code, but we have the ability to get very rapid feedback in the form of the product itself. So any questions before we move into a demo? All right. So I think I need to share the full screen here. All right, can I get a confirmation that you guys can see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. I need to move some stuff around here. Okay, so here is the Skafos dashboard. I will actually log out real quick. If you come to our website, you can actually sign up for our product, and you're taken to the dashboard here where you can log in. And if you don't already have projects within Skafos, you'd be presented very quickly with a quick start project. So we're going to do an iOS quick start project. On this screen, you're given a very simple walkthrough of we need to talk about what project type we're going to be building for your idea. We're going to introduce you to some of the model code and data for that. And then we're going to show you how to integrate that into a walking skeleton. We'll move forward with that right now. So the project name, we'll just call this Poison Ivy 5. I do a bunch of these, as you can imagine. And now if you're an iOS developer, a lot of what you see down in this portion of the screen is probably going to be familiar. If it's not, I'd ask you not to worry about it too much. This is the actual app name. And then there's some information here that I need to fill out that's important for an organization that's actually developing one of these apps. So if you're ever to pay Apple's developer fee and go ahead and build your own apps, you would kind of understand a little bit more clearly what we're looking at here. But what we filled out is a bunch of information to identify the app, the team ID, the key ID, and then this is going to help us generate a push token required by Skafos. And we hit continue. So now step 2 of quick start. We need to choose a model. There's a little bit of information here about each of these model types. You can think of these as problem sets, right? Do I want to generate a recommender for my customers? Is my idea an image classifier or an object detection app or something like, a style transfer? Each of these have a little bit.
Sorry, real quick. I just had a question for you. So is this just a demo on the Skafos? Because you mentioned that we could go sign up on your website.
Sure. That's right.
So would we have to get our own Apple developer codes for that step you just did to be able to use this?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer would be yes, but there are broader utilization. I mean, there are broader uses for our platform that we can, right after I show you this demo, I will actually just show that to you real quick if you'd like.
Okay.
So we can essentially fire up some environments for you that might still be useful for even your classes that don't necessarily deploy directly to an app.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So for Is It Poison Ivy, the app that we're talking about or the product, we know that's an image classification job. There's a little bit more information here if you'd like to understand that problem set a little bit. You can also click on View the Model Code. So the model code is open source. It's actually written by another organization called Create, part of Apple, and we basically validated it on our platform and made sure it worked correctly. So we're going to hit continue now. Skafos is now provisioning an environment for this project. So it takes a little bit of time for that to be set up in the cloud. And then we get this integration step. So this is This is how we connect that cloud environment to an app that we want to stand up for ourselves in this case. If you already have an app that you've built, if you're an iOS developer or working with an iOS developer, there's a bunch of details here that tell you how to drag these models and our framework into the app. That's all basically from integration for Swift and iOS down. The other and easier option that I'm going to demo right now is you can use one of the example apps that's actually paired with our models. So I'm going to go ahead and skip a lot of that integration mess by taking this as the application I'm going to use.
I'll also add that I'm someone who's never built an iOS app before, and I found this whole workflow really easy. Like, I was a little bit intimidated before, like, oh no, I'm a data scientist, I can't do this. But it was actually, I've come to like it quite a bit.
Okay, so this is me just basically creating my project on my local device, my laptop. So I'm going to git clone this project into a folder that I'm going to call Poison Ivy 5. You can name it whatever you want. And I'll just take a minute while we pull down the example app code from GitHub. Now I'm going to move into that directory. I'm going to confirm that I'm there, and then I'm going to do something called pod install. What this is doing is it's using a package management service called CocoaPods to essentially connect this app to our infrastructure. So this is, again, connecting the app that I'm building locally and putting onto my phone to all that infrastructure that was just provisioned as part of our Skafos project in the cloud. Once that's complete, I'm going to just open image classification workspace. This is Xcode, and we're done with the command line at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. All right, this is the example app opened up. The first thing that we want to do is name it. We'll just call it Poison Ivy 5. We need to change our bundle ID to reflect exactly the same thing that's in our project. So this is actually the Poison Ivy 5 project page. Down here in Core ML Delivery, this section, there's something called App Settings. So I'm going to use this same bundle ID that you see right here within my Xcode project. Okay, I need to select my team. Again, a lot of this is unique to coding an app. Oops. And then the final thing is within what's called an app delegate in Xcode, I need to enter that key that was generated by our project I was telling you about previously. This is for push tokens. This is how we get models pushed to phones. The publishable key is located right here. So I'll copy that and paste it. Save everything. I'll do one last confirmation that my bundle ID is the same as what's here. And it is. And then I'm going to build with my iPhone as target. Just a second. Let me open QuickTime so you guys can see what's happening there. And that's me.
And I'm over here. Hi.
Some of you might not know that you can actually record what's going on your phone just using QuickTime. If I can click in the right spot.
There we go.
Yep. Okay, so that's my phone mirrored over. All right, so I'm going to build this app. What's happening right now is Xcode is building the app and going to install it locally to this phone.
And so while that's happening, I wanted to address one of the questions that we just got. So the code on Git, what language is it in? So the code for the app that Luke cloned is Swift. The code for the image classification model itself is written in Python. So there's two different repos here. One is in Python, which is the machine learning, and then one is in Swift, which is the iOS app. So great question. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so what we have right now is an app that was downloaded. This is our example app, and I know that we've talked a lot about this being poison ivy, but the first thing that the app comes preloaded with is a model that identifies cats and dogs. So you see Ruff here and Meow. These are our little test subjects. So I'm just going to show you that there's actually a model behind this example app by taking a picture of one of the test subjects. So the app's coming back with a classification of that as a dog at a probability of 100%, which is probably terrible in terms of an app, but at least it shows you that, yes, we have an app that is evaluating whether or not something is an image. In an image is a cat or a dog. So now what we're going to do is, in some ways, I suppose, a little bit of cooking show magic. Before we talk about that, I'm going to launch our cloud-based IDE where you actually deal with the model code. So what I'm launching right now is called Jupyter Lab. For those of you who are familiar with data science, you've probably dealt with labs in some way or notebooks. This is our version of those. They run in our cloud and our infrastructure, and it's where you save your model code. All the model code, as Miriam just said, is written in Python. And as this fires up, I'll take a moment to see if there's any questions at this point.
We have one other question. Is Skafos only used for mobile development, or can I also use this for a web app?
Great question.
Great question. Should we address this now, or should we wait till after the demo?
Let's go ahead and address it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you can use it absolutely for other use cases, as Luke mentioned earlier, particularly in Jupyter Lab. He's going to go into some of the code right now. You can use this right here to develop and deploy machine learning models. So while we are, the workflow that we're walking you through is more geared towards
a specific use
case, you can absolutely use it for other use cases outside of that. Luke, I don't know if you want to comment further.
Yeah, I'll go a little bit further to say that although our cloud-based infrastructure is very extensible to other use cases, if you want to kind of work directly with us and wade through figuring that out yourself, we are also actively building out new feature sets. And while we started with iOS in particular as a product focus, we're only weeks away from engaging a REST API or building out some other, we're evaluating other options for supporting web frameworks. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, I have fired up Jupyter Notebooks. I have opened the project. You can run, you notice that notebooks give you, rich text on top of chunks of code. You can hit Shift Enter and actually run cells without having to run all the rest of the code. So we could dive a little bit more into notebooks if people are interested, but mainly what I want to call out here is that this is the image classifier broad model type. And we're walking through a couple steps here. This tells you how we're loading, in particular, the pet image data into the model, how the model is actually built. This is commented out for now. And then how the model is saved into our infrastructure. This is all on the notebook side. So I could actually go ahead and uncomment these components of the code, but I'd only really want to do that once I'd already collected data related to solving my problem. So images of poison ivy that I want to train the model on. I've done that previously, and it takes about an hour and 20 minutes to actually train that model. So I'm going to do a little bit of cooking show magic here, and I'm going to curl in to this local environment, that trained model that I have hung on S3. So just a second while I do that. Close that. All right, that model just got curled into my local environment in the cloud. You see poison ivy image classifier right here. And the next thing I'm going to do is actually just go ahead and use the SDK to, instead of retraining everything, oh, that was a misclick. Instead of retraining a whole model, I'm actually just going to save and deploy a poison ivy model, right? So here is us loading up the SDK. Here's me identifying this model as the one that I want to load in, compressing it, specifying the name of the model, and then saving it to the Skafos infrastructure. What's going to happen here, I'm going to go ahead and click Shift Enter, which actually runs that cell, is this is actually going to save that model into our push infrastructure, and it's going to push the model directly out to this phone. The same app that you just saw a minute or two ago that was evaluating images for cat or dog is now going to evaluate for poison ivy, or one of 5 different classes of poison ivy. So while we're waiting for that to happen, any questions? And we'll come right back around and look at another type of project real quick before we end the demo, so that you guys can see that this is valuable for people who are just doing Python, for instance.
And also, just to call out for those of you unfamiliar with Jupyter Labs or Jupyter Notebooks, you can see once this, there'll be a bunch of output down here, but you can see that that is still a star, and now it's shifted to a number 1, so we can see that this cell is done running.
This is the SDK output saying that a model is saved successfully. If we come to our front end, down here in the core ML delivery portion, we can click on model artifacts and see that we actually have saved an artifact into our infrastructure.
So why don't we have a couple of additional questions. One is the processing done on the phone? And so for this,
let me just show it real quick.
Yeah, okay, let's have Luke show it, yeah, and then we'll get to these. And we have another question after that, which is, do you support?
Love the questions, keep them rolling in. So, all right, so we saw that at least on the infrastructure side, everything's correct. And now, since we're debugging in Xcode, meaning like I'm connected to it, you can actually see that the new model was downloaded and loaded on the device as well. So let's go ahead and test that. I'm going to mirror the screen. I'm going to actually take a picture of Ruff again, because it's just easy. And what you're going to see is that we've evaluated him as a class of poison ivy. The model, which admittedly is not a great model, is saying that he's high probability to be Eastern poison ivy. Now, I think it's really important to call out 2 things here. First, what you just saw was us training, or at least saving and pushing, a new model without redeploying the application code to the phone. The second thing I will call out is, for those of you that are not familiar with machine learning, this might be a little confusing. When you train a model on a bunch of images and give it a series of labels like Eastern, Western poison ivy and poison sumac, it's going to think that every picture that you show it is one of those 5 things. It's not aware of anything else in the world or of the history of mankind or itself. And so what you're seeing here is that it believes that this model believes that this picture of a dog is actually closest, even though it may not be that close at all, to its notion of Eastern poison ivy. So this is where, if you were going to go ahead and move forward building a actual your next step of the application on top of this walking skeleton, you might say, hey, this lets me know that I need to collect more data about poison ivy, and I also maybe need to do some checking of the image with the application itself in order to evaluate whether or not to tell people that there's actually poison ivy on the screen.
So
there are a couple questions. Let's come to those real quick.
But how do you get the actual? So if you're training it right now, like, what is it comparing against to classify?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How does it get that initial data to compare against?
So that's a great question. So this is, I think, where a little bit of the cooking show magic comes in. So the poison ivy model was one that Luke had already trained. And so what he did was he has, I think you can see on his screen, these group of folders. And so in each of those, there's images. And so in the Atlantic Poison Oak directory, all of these images are Atlantic Poison Oak. And then similarly for the other directories. And so we ran this through the image classification algorithm. And so then it assigns, as Luke said, any new picture is going to be assigned to one of these 5 categories with a certain probability. So this is where if you were building a model and you wanted to identify, say, pigs, sheep, and horses, you would have a bunch of images of each that are labeled, and then you would, potentially use the Jupyter lab to train that model.
Yeah, to be very explicit about that, in this notebook that we showed you earlier, the Turi image classifier, you would want to upload those images either directly into this notebook or, as is the case in this code, put them on S3 or some of our file hosting service. So what I did in this case, when I did my hour and a half of training, is I replaced this reference to the pet images with exactly this directory that was also hosted on AWS S3. And so at that point, once you load that data, you can really execute the model very much as written. You don't really have to change much, and it will output the poison ivy. You do have to change the labels. Miriam is pointing at me. Like, I had to change the labels to be poison ivy related, the 5 classes of poison ivy.
Yeah. Couple of other questions. That was a great question. A couple of other questions. We love them. Is the processing done on the phone? And when you say processing, you mean after the training. So what happens is the model is pushed to the phone. So when Luke takes a picture, the model is running on the phone. So when it decides dog versus cat or, poison ivy, poison sumac, it's happening on the phone. The other question is whether or not we support Android. I'm going to let Luke answer that question.
Yes, you could support Android right now, but we haven't targeted that as our beachhead audience. It's right up there, right next to supporting web frameworks. So you're going to see that also in the next couple weeks. So it's coming very quickly. We know it's a little silly to pretend that we're going to have a long-term product that only supports iOS.
Yeah.
Definitely, we're targeting Android as well. But you could do that right now yourself if you like to.
So once that model is created, it no longer requires the pictures to reference back to you, right? So when you deploy to your phone, you don't need a database of pictures to reference to.
No,
because the model
that is correct.
has data. Okay.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, the model is built, to recognize whatever you told it to recognize. But yes, that's correct. Once that model is on Luke's phone, he doesn't need access to those 5 directories of photos.
I like to compare it. This is a silly analogy, but it works for me because I have young kids. It's like if I train my 2-year-old son by showing him only 5 different categories of flashcards, and then I kept those flashcards at the house, and I sent my son out in the world to evaluate everything he looked at as one of those 5 things. So it's very useful. It's incredibly powerful, but it's also not a panacea, right? You don't have, machine learning is incredibly powerful, particularly in what it can evaluate and how quickly. But that's a useful paradigm for evaluating, I suppose, what exactly is happening in a general sense.
Yeah. Another question that we have, great question, was the 90-minute training on AWS or your MacBook?
Sure. The 90-minute training was actually on AWS, only with 1 core. So I only actually had it running in the notebook. We are this week deploying the ability to train on up to 7 cores and over 30 gigs of RAM. And shortly thereafter, we're going to be moving to GPUs, which Turi Create, the framework that we're using, also supports. So that training time can be cut by a factor of 7-ish once you scale it up to 7 CPUs, and may come down to only minutes, although I haven't tried it on, like a V100 GPU or anything. Yeah. So yeah, we're looking to make that extremely rapid so that you could iterate through these models, this model development process very quickly. All right, so someone asks, can you support any other type of, project type other than, I think we've had questions about web frameworks, we have questions about Android. Just generally speaking too, if you are interested in messing around with Python and eventually maybe want to integrate a model into something, you can also sign up for our platform, and then you can come over here to new projects and you can fire up what's called a standard project. We call it a standard project at least. here, I'm going to write some Gaelic. You can, no one got the joke. You can move forward and just use our boilerplate, which is effectively just a blank notebook. You don't actually ever have to fill anything into this CoreML delivery. You could hide it. So then you just have this model code section, and you could launch this Jupyter Lab. And you could use it to learn Python. You could use it to connect to data that's stored on S3 or in some other location. You could train your own models. You could try out Tree Create. You could pip install within this environment TensorFlow or other frameworks.
You can clone in your own. It's integrated with Git. So if you wanted to, if you have a repo somewhere that you want to use, you can clone it in and use it.
So it's meant to be a very powerful and very extensible cloud-based environment for training models, but we're really focused about wanting to push you towards the integration of those models into even simple products, right? The idea is we want you to be relevant with your ML to the world. So that's why we focused with that quick start on getting you to an application very quickly. But that certainly doesn't have to be the case for this platform to be valuable to you.
The walking, that's why we emphasize the walking skeleton, right? It's getting things into a product quickly.
Okay.
What would be the advantage? So you're saying we can access the Jupyter Lab through Skafos, right?
Sure. Yep.
Why would we do that instead of going directly to Jupyter Lab, like Jupyter.org, for example?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, you're welcome to do that. I would encourage you to use Skafos because, as we stated before, we're trying to drive you towards the idea that you're integrating it into something, right? If all you want to do is mess around with notebooks, and if you want to worry about integration into other products in the future, totally fine. Go for it. We're not pretending to be a replacement to Jupyter, Jupyter.org. We're merely encouraging you to use our platform so that as you decide that you want to integrate that project into something, you will very, very quickly, you already have the ability to do it into iOS and very quickly have the ability to do it in Android or another web framework.
I'd also add that you can run a Jupyter Lab on your notebook or on your desktop. But one of the things I like about running it on Skafos is that I have the whole power of the platform behind me. So soon, with multiple CPUs, GPUs, I have more compute power available to me than I would have locally. And then, as Luke said, eventually it's just much easier to deploy it. One question is, do you integrate with something like Docker?
Yeah, we actually run on Kubernetes and Docker in the cloud. And so I would just ask whoever asked that question, connect with me right afterwards, and I'd love to peel back what you're specifically asking about. But yeah, certainly we use Kubernetes to orchestrate Docker containers that both, for instance, Docker is housing RJ Labs, right? So what you're actually seeing when you open up that environment is something that's running in a container in the cloud, orchestrated by Skafos and Kubernetes.
Another question, at what point or how do you train it to do not poison ivy? Even the program knows only 5 concepts. The ability to do not one of those would need to be invoked. So I'm not sure if I'm quite parsing the question, but I'll answer from the data science perspective, and then Luke will answer it from the practical perspective.
From a practical perspective, this is part of why I think it's really important, personally, to have a walking skeleton and understand that it's not just a data science job to solve that problem. Yeah. What you articulated is a product problem, not just a data science or ML problem. And so there's probably a bunch of ways to solve it, but since Poison Ivy is my little kind of side project, the way that I'm looking to solve it is by really narrowing down the world that a user would actually, the types of images that a user would actually capture. And one way to do that is with, just a second, let me see if I can pull up. One way to do that is with this screen, when you go to provide the camera overlay, we could have some messaging and a very light image of the tri-pattern leaf to say, hey, please step very close to the plant and attempt to capture an image of the leaf pattern and the leaf pattern alone. Don't give me a picture of the bush. Don't give me a picture of anyone else. And so that's all app side. You might use the app to actually really control what people are trying to capture, what they're trying to evaluate. In that case, if all you're ever really getting is 3 pattern leaves, you're going to get a lot closer to the inference coming out of the model being useful and valuable, right? You're only giving it data that it's actually good at providing recommendations around or inference around.
Yeah.
I'll let Miriam answer it on the model side.
Yeah, I think, from the model side, you could, so Luke, when he started doing this, he chose those 5 categories. You could certainly have a category that's other, right? You could train the model on a category called other. That's certainly something that you could do as well. But I think, at what point or how do you train it to do not poison ivy? As Luke said, it's a feedback. And I think one thing that we're also working on is once you take a picture, and it gives you a probability, if you've trained the model really well, it's going to be correct most of the time. But machine learning is not infallible, and so sometimes you're going to be incorrect. And so when you are taking that data, taking the correct answer and feeding it back in, so you have that iterative process.
I think we answered the not poison ivy question. Yeah. If you were looking to have something else answered, like how do you train it to do something else entirely, just choose to text and we'll answer that.
Yeah.
All right, so that culminates our demo. Sometimes people ask us, well, what the hell else can I do with ML, right? Yeah. And we spent a lot of time, brainstorming crazy ideas, and here's just 3 that we thought were funny. Tribe. This would suggest real-life friends by pairing people who take pictures in similar locations. So there might be a cloud-based service that you stand up, or storage that has XY coordinates for images, and there's a similarity, image similarity that gives you nearby users. Scavenger hunt gets kids into nature. Kids learn points for taking pictures of items on the list. This would use probably an image classifier to say, hey, yes, indeed, you did find a picture of a raspberry, and you found a picture of a dog, just kind of check them off the list.
Yep.
The final would be cocktail shaker. Shake an app to get a cocktail suggestion. It will make recommendations and learn your palate over time. So for this to work, you'd have to get the recommendation and then probably give a thumbs up or thumbs down each time you get a recommendation, so that then the model, we could push that all to the server side and retrain it based on your preferences, and then push the updated model to the phone. There's a bunch more of these. I think we have them on our Reddit sub. You might want to check in there. I think we have 11 or 12 different other crazy ideas.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, hopefully we've given you some context and some rationale for the importance and what we're really excited about with the renaissance of ML-driven products. We obviously gave you a demo of Skafos, some app examples. You guys have asked fantastic questions. Really, really appreciate those. And then I think as a final, comment, of course, is, please keep the questions coming. We still have, I think, about 10 more minutes. But we invite you to join us. We have Slack. You're welcome to join our Slack. If you go to skafos.ai, there's a link there to our Slack community. We'd love to have you join and ask questions. As Luke said, we have a subreddit, a Skafos subreddit. So we'd love to see you there as well. And then, of course, you are welcome to contact either of us directly.
All right, let's see if there's anything in this. How can we access it? Skafos.ai would be where you want to go to join. That was this question. I don't know if you can even see my little Zoom chat screen. Let me scroll all the way up to see. Not poison ivy is where we stopped. Okay. So for something other than images, was something like your ML craft brewing collaboration. Nice reference.
Yes, thank you.
The same idea with Skafos in a standard setting, feeding it profiles of good, bad beers to generate a model of what objectively makes a beer good through ML. I'll let Miriam take that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So yeah, you can use this on anything other than images, right? And that's exactly it. You would have a particular beer with, different ABV and other features, and then whether or not it was good or bad. And then that's exactly right. You would train the model on that to pick out, what is a good beer. So we absolutely have the ability to use standard data, if you're pulling from a SQL database, a CSV, anything like that. We've spent a lot of time today focusing on pictures just because that's, what we do with our phone, right? We take pictures and do other stuff, but 100% we can use tabular data as well.
So from my perspective, that craft beer exercise, I'll just describe it really quickly, was very powerful in the sense that it was very quick, and it generated a product that was actually super good.
Yeah, it was delicious.
We went to the Great American Beer Festival. We took their ratings, and we took the few data points that were collected about each of the beers with the ratings. And I think it was alcohol by volume, it was color, it was bitterness, and one other thing, I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. And we basically ran that data through and came up with a recommended recipe, or not even recipe, it was a recommended target for ABV, bitterness, color, so on and so forth, that we handed back to the brewers and let them use their art to arrive at those numbers, right? And it came out awesome. It was like a session IPA that smelled a little bit citrusy, but it was not super bitter. It was awesome. All right. How can we access it? Yep, Skafos.ai. Can you integrate LOT with Skafos? I'm not sure what LOT is.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I think that's IoT.
Oh, IoT. Yes.
Yeah, we are. We're definitely driving towards that. So if you consider a phone in some ways an internet-connected device on the edge, we just started with kind of an ecosystem that was best supported with millions of devices out there, which is Apple's ecosystem. We are very much interested in working to deploy things to Garmin devices, which are wearables. Or Alexa devices. Alexa, I know, has a bunch of SDKs out there for you to basically put Alexa on almost anything, from a car to a toothbrush. I think there was a toothbrush commercial.
No, it was a Super Bowl commercial last night with the quote-unquote failed Alexa ideas.
Yeah, and so we think there's a lot of power with running at the edge. And yes, our aim is to continue to support people who have needs and requirements for IoT devices. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great question. Just curious how you handle iterative training as you collect data from the user. Is it different from the batch training you do at the beginning? Great question. So to be totally transparent, the automated feedback loop is something we're working on, but it's not fully in place yet. So now, you need to figure out within the app how to collect data from the user, feed it back in. For example, we use S3 a lot, Amazon S3 buckets to incorporate that. But now it would be a little bit of a manual process to incorporate that data, but automating it is something that's definitely in the product roadmap.
Yeah, on our enterprise side, we've definitely automated that already for a number of customers. The collection of data from a bunch of social platforms, the pre-processing and cleaning of it, and then the creation of models that drive some dashboards. It's absolutely something you can do on our platform right now. You could set that up, and we could also work with you to set it up. I think what Miriam, a little bit more clarity around the statement that we don't support it yet, the feedback loop, is just that it's not productized in the sense that you log in and look at our dashboard and immediately see how you could generate a feedback loop. But that's where we're going. We believe that ML is really about experimentation and the scientific method. It's not about guess and check. It's about being able to put together a model, integrate it into a product, push it out to production, and then collect information and make it better and better and better. And I think without that last part, it's very hard to imagine ML really being an amazing tool. It can be a pretty great tool. But yeah, we're looking to make that a very obvious portion of our product as we continue to build out Skafos.
So I think we might have time for one more question, and then I think we need to wrap up.
I was wondering, do you have open source opportunities on your GitHub?
So all the code that Luke mentioned, both the apps and the models themselves and the Jupyter notebooks are it's all open source. So github.com/Skafos, and you can go and you can access all of the code to build the apps and to build the models themselves.
And you're welcome to contribute to those projects if you're interested. You're welcome to create projects or explore the platform, writing your own code, modifying ours, and open sourcing it yourself if you'd like. We welcome that. We'd love to work with you if you'd like to do that. It's certainly something that we are very interested in engaging.
Yeah, so I think that's it. Sherry, I don't know if you have anything final to wrap up, but we've had an awesome time, great questions, and we really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Miriam, Luke, and Lisa, we really, really appreciate the time you took to do this for us today. I think we had about like 28 students, and I got a bunch of emails. They were in so many different programs at Flatiron, which we also really haven't had so far. And to the students, I hope you found this really valuable and that you can possibly build on your portfolio and join other local meetups, because I found this group through a local meetup here in Charlottesville, and we learn a lot in the program, but having those in-person network connections and getting like tutorials on the spot, the tech community is generally like so willing to help out, and I've gained so much from doing so. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll have one final comment. This is Luke again. We have joined forces a little bit with WeWork, in the sense that we joined the organization and started examining presenting at happy hours and during lunch and learn. So if you'd like us to come to you, if you work at a WeWork or some other co-working space, or if you have a meetup that you'd like us to come work with, we are very interested in building a community. We believe that this is a nascent space. It's not about getting people to join our platform and then all of a sudden everything's going to make sense to them. It's about building what people need and investing in people so that they learn more about how to solve the problems they want to solve. So please feel free to reach out to either myself or Miriam, or just directly to us on Slack or Reddit. And we'd love to come to you and present at one of those types of events. So keep that in mind.
Thank you very much.
Answer your
partner.
question.
Yeah, we want to dialogue with you guys and help you get things built. Awesome.
That's it from us. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye.